Welcome back to the Path of Longevity show, and I'm your host, Dr. Robert Lufkin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Steven Sideroff.
Today, we're going to talk about a fascinating topic that doesn't get nearly enough attention in longevity, and that is the microbiome. And we're fortunate to have a serial entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and a founder of one of the leading microbiome companies, Naveen Jain. Naveen, thanks for joining us today.
Well, first of all, Dr. Lufkin, it's a pleasure and an honor. And it's been, since I met you, it's always been, every single conversation we have is always energizing and inspiring.
Well, great. Well, I love your story, how you came to be involved in this and all the fascinating things you've done. I didn't want to try and summarize it there. Maybe you could just take a moment and tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here.
Well, first of all, I started Viome 7 years ago. And that's, by the way, Viome is V as in Victor, I-O-M-E. A lot of people with Indian origin cannot pronounce the word V as in Victor. So I always spell it out for people. Started Viome 7 years ago with a simple belief. What if we can actually understand at a molecular level what changes, what are the underlying things that change when people have onset or a progression of chronic diseases, such as obesity, such as diabetes. And really, if you look at depression, anxiety, or Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, as I think we're going to get to it, their underlying root cause is inflammation. In fact, the longevity is defined by the lot of the chronic inflammation in the body, and thus this idea of inflammaging, that inflammation actually causes you to age because all of your organs in your body are impacted when you have a chronic inflammation. How do you know what is causing that inflammation? And that is fundamentally the problem we set out to solve. And we say, it is not that, many of us have this idea that we are a product of the DNA that we get from mom and dad. And our destiny is set in that DNA. And that is a fundamental myth that has been created by the society and by a lot of the people who have spent a lot of their energy and resources in looking at DNA. Well, it turns out that you and I, Dr. Lufkin, agree that if you were to do my DNA test today, and God forbid I gain 200 pounds, my DNA still hasn't changed. Now I get diabetes. You can do my DNA test all over again, and it still hasn't changed. And then I get heart disease, and I get depression, I get anxiety, they get Alzheimer's. And you can watch my DNA, it still never changes. And then I die. And then 10 years after I die, you actually go out and do my DNA test all over again. Guess what? It's an identical DNA. You can look at the DNA of a dinosaur, it doesn't change. So if DNA can't even tell you you're dead or alive, how will it ever tell you you're healthy or sick? The fact is, two twins, identical DNA, one may get sick and other doesn't. So the point is, the first thing I want to point out trying to make is your genes are not your destiny. So don't blame your genes and say, oh, I was dealt with a bad card. Yes, there may be a propensity for certain diseases to happen, but doesn't mean you're going to get them. So literally take responsibility. The idea of aging or idea of having these chronic diseases are actually in your control. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about that. The second part is just as interesting, which is we as human beings, 99% or more of all of our genes that are expressed in our body don't come from our own mom and dad. They actually come from these organisms that sit inside our gut, in our mouth, in our nasal cavity, in our eyes, in our ear cavity, and all over our body. 100 trillion microbes in our body. And they produce somewhere between 2 million to 20 million protein coding genes, compared to 22,000 protein coding genes that our human body does. So if we can look at the things in terms of genes, it's really about 150 to 1. So more than 99% of all the genes in our body are these microbiome. And people think, they ask and say, what is this microbiome? well, these are bacteria, these are viruses, these are fungi, these are all the eukaryotes, right? And people say, oh my God, we got to kill them all because they are all parasites. Well, interestingly, what? The human body is a super organism. Every one of them, we couldn't live without them. In fact, we can be born, but we could not survive without them. We evolve, we co-evolve together as one super organism. We outsource many of the functions to them to be able to produce the stuff that our body needs. So much so, Dr. Lufkin, when the baby is born, the first few days of the mother's breast milk contains nothing but oligosaccharides. And these oligosaccharides cannot be digested by the human body. They can only be digested by our microbiome. So imagine what the nature is telling us. We just created an offspring, and the best way to keep this offspring healthy is to feed them, not feed it, right? And that's really interesting, is that because at the end of the day, our immune system, which I think we're going to talk a little bit about, this is where the inflammation comes from. Our immune system is trained by our microbiome. So in some sense, what is a friend, what is a foe, is microbiome, and our immune system is constantly interacting. As I said, majority of our microbiome actually is in our gut. And that's the reason 70% of our immune system is along our gut lining, right? So there you have it, right? So in fact, in the early days, babies get a lot more infection because their immune system is yet not quite ready for prime time. So microbiome is constantly tuning the immune system, and they become part of that ecosystem that lives together as superorganism.
Oh, this is such a fascinating area. Before we dive into the gut microbiome and inflammation and aging, look, could you just take a moment and tell us, just to set the framework, how you conceptualize aging and longevity? Why does an organism age? What's your model that you work from?
Very, very good. So first of all, if you think about it, we have this concept that somehow the human beings actually get old, they get sick, and they die by the time they're 90, 100, or 110. We as humans must die. And then you look at other mammalians, whether it is some of the whales that live to be 400, 500 years, or some of the tortoise that can live to be a couple of hundred years. There's nothing in the mammalian DNA or nothing in the mammalian cells that says we must die when we turn 100 and 110, right? Or we must get sick when we become 50. Or as we say, oh, your memory is not what it used to be because you're getting old, or your body is not what it used to be because you're getting old. And then we look at the people who are 80 or 90, and they still have the same energy when they had 50, right? What is it about them, right? Now, I myself, I'm 63 now, and my biological age is now come down to 50. What does that really mean? It's not that I'm 50 years old. It is functionally, my body is performing at 50 years old. So when I'm 70, it is quite possible that my biological age will come down to 40. It doesn't mean I'm reversing aging. I'm still 70 years old. It's just that my body is performing at a 40-year-old function. And that is what we are talking about. So when people talk about longevity, no one wants to be living in a condition that we somehow relate to the people who are 90 years old. They're fragile. They can't walk properly. They're most of the time are in wheelchair, or they have walkers. And you're saying, I don't want to live forever. But ask them, would you like to live for 200 years if you could still do the same thing that you could do when you were 30 or 40 years old? And answer to most people will say, yes. But nobody wants to live the life of to be 200 years if they're going to be sitting in a bed on a wheelchair for the last 150 of them, right? Nobody wants that life, right? So the idea is to increase not just the lifespan, but increase the health span. That means live longer, healthier, not just live longer. So that framework we use is, to us, longevity is about increasing the health span, not just the lifespan. And then we look at the longevity as what causes body to age. And we found, Dr. Lufkin, there are 5 things that are actually in the pyramid shape of Maslow's hierarchy of pyramid for longevity. At the bottom most that is absolutely needed is nutrition. And this nutrition, what is good for your body? And I'm going to come back and explain you what is it that. It's not about those food pyramid that you're used to seeing, eat bit of vegetables, eat them, lots of different variety. Remember, just because it's a plant food doesn't mean it's healthy for you. Just remember, almost every poison comes from a plant. So just because it's a plant food doesn't mean it's healthy for you. Always remember, one man's food is another man's poison. That means a food that can be good for you doesn't mean it's good for your spouse, right? So that's the first part, is the nutrition. The second part is stress reduction. Is a constant stress in our body puts us in a fight or flight response. The cortisol, or we call the neurocorticoid, every time you're stressed, the brain releases the neurocorticoid that becomes cortisol, that causes the inflammation. But more importantly, when you're stressed, what happens? You're in a fight or flight response. And when you're in the fight or flight response, people may not realize that normally would happen when you're being chased by a tiger. What does the body do? When you're being chased by a tiger, it says, let's shut down all the non-essential system. You don't need to worry about digesting your food anymore. You're going to become lunch for someone else very soon if you don't run away. The digestive system shuts down. Your immune system completely shuts down because you don't need to worry about immune system right now when you're being chased. And everything at that point is fully focused on getting you out of that situation. And that always worked in the olden days when we had a threat which was life-threatening. But we today live in this environment, we are constantly stressed. And as you and I know, we go to work and our boss stresses you out, right? You go home and your spouse stresses you out. And you literally are constantly under stress because you watch the news. If it bleeds, it leads. You're constantly hearing the negative news all the time. That's why we call CNN the constant negative news network, right? The idea is this is the stuff that is constantly causing us stress. So you need to now find a way to get rid of the stress, whether you do the meditation or you get rid of the job or you get rid of the spouse. You got to find a way to get rid of that stress. The number 3 is you got to move your body, the exercise. Without that, your body cannot function. So you call that yoga, you can call that, you're not talking about being a gym rat. You simply want to be able to get 30 to 45 minutes of, basic walking and fast walking where your heart rate is slightly up. That's all you really need, 30 to 40 minutes of exercise. You don't need to be a gym rat. The 4th part is sleep. You got to be able to get a good night's sleep. Now, again, the myth here is the quantity matters. And I think what we're learning is the quality matters, not just the quantity. So it's not about getting 8-10 hours of sleep. It is about getting a good amount of REM sleep and a good amount of deep sleep. Now, I don't know about, everyone. I think, I am one of those people who hit the pillow when I go to sleep. And even if I sleep for 6 hours, which most of the time I do, I get 2 hours of deep sleep and I get 2 hours of REM sleep in there. And that to me is really the quality of sleep you're looking for, because this is where all of your brain functions are constant. Your brain is getting rejuvenated, right? So all this stuff is getting flushed out. This is where the immune system in your brain starts to work. This is where all the neural connections are being made. This is how the long-term memories are being formed, right? So that's the 4th part. And the last part, at least to me, is finding a purpose. When you find the purpose, you find what you are willing to die for, and then you live for it. Finding that North Star that makes you wake up at 4 a.m. and makes you jump out of the bed when you wake up. Having that purpose, actually now scientifically shown that people who have a purpose tend to live 8 to 10 years longer than the people who have no purpose. So people with a purpose-driven life actually tend to live longer. And that's really the 5 things we look at in terms of aging and longevity.
Yeah, I want to get in each one of those. at the basic level, inflammation.
Yes.
How does that drive the aging then?
Absolutely. So let's start with the bottom part, the nutrition. So I'm going to step back here and actually give you just a little bit more about what is it that we do at Viome, and because that fits into all the things we're talking about here in a second here. So at Viome, if you are listening to it, you can go to viome.com. That's V as in Victor, IOME.com. And then you can order a test. And what we do is we ask you to give us a spit of your saliva, couple of 2 drops or 3 drops of your finger prick blood, and a touch of your stool. And what we're doing there is analyzing your gut microbiome and how the human genes are expressed in the epithelial cells. From your saliva, we are looking at your oral microbiome, and we're looking at the human genes that are expressed in our saliva. And then we're looking at the blood. And by looking at the blood, we are able to see how is your mitochondria functioning. How is your immune system? Because when we're looking at the finger prick blood, we're looking at all of your interleukins. So basically all the cytokines. We are looking at all of the genes that are expressed in your immune system. And now we're able to see the interaction between your oral microbiome, your gut microbiome, and the human host. And that allows us to now look at things as a whole. Now, so coming back to it, what differentiates us from anyone else, Dr. Lufkin, is we are looking at the mRNA, the gene expression, and the non-coding RNA. So we look at RNA, not at your DNA. DNA never changes. Your RNA is always changing. Your destiny is written by your RNA, not by your DNA. And most people who may not know what difference between the gene expression or genes or RNA versus DNA is, look at our body. Dr. Lufkin, I think you are obviously understand it. Every single part of our body, from our hair to our skin to our eyes to nails to finger, have identical DNA, the same DNA. It starts with the same cell, right? That zygote, right? Mom's sperms, eggs, zygote, and every single part of our body is now coming from the same DNA. Then why is it I don't have the eyes growing on my fingers and the nails growing on my hand? Same DNA. What happens is some genes are overexpressed and some are underexpressed. They become hair. And different genes are overexpressed and underexpressed. They become eye and skin and heart and nails and everything else, right? That means the same alphabet can write any story you want. And what matters is what story are you writing? That's your RNA. And that's the first thing we do. So when we look at all of these samples, we are looking at your RNA, and then we're looking at the same thing, the RNA of the microbiome. Because again, the same organism, same microbiome can produce something good in one environment, and same organism can produce something toxic in a different environment, right? You take a person, put them in a good environment, good behavior. Take a person, put them in a bad environment, the bad behavior, right? So we look at what are they producing, not who they are. And by looking at what they are producing, now we are able to see how that interacts with the human host and how is the inflammation changing. That means if you're producing sulfide, you're producing ammonia, you're producing LPS, all those things we know is going to cause higher inflammation in your body. If you're producing things as butyrate or the short chain fatty acid, what does it do? It's anti-inflammatory. It actually reduces the inflammation. And now our job is to actually come up with the right food for you that will reduce the inflammatory markers and that will increase the stuff that is anti-inflammatory. So for example, if we see that your gut microbiome is producing a lot of sulfide, and we know the sulfide causes inflammation, what do? We say, don't eat broccoli, don't eat cabbage or Brussels sprout, because all of these contains a sulfur containing compounds that is going to convert into sulfide, causing you more inflammation. When we say, hey, your oxalate pathways are not very active, then you shouldn't eat the food that are high in oxalate, such as spinach. So despite what Popeye tells you, Popeye was not a scientist. We can tell you the spinach is no good for you. When we see a lot of ammonia production, and we see this ammonia is being produced through fermentation of protein, then we say, hey, you're eating too much protein that's not being digested. You need to either cut down the protein or take a digestive enzyme with the protein so it gets properly digested before the microbiome ferment that protein. So guess what? So now we are able to tell you not only what's happening in your body. So first thing we say is, by analyzing all your samples, what is your biological age? What is your immune health? What is your cognitive health? What is your cardiac health? What is your gut health? What is your cellular health, right? And then we give you 200 other deep scores. And then we tell you, here are the foods you should eat, and here is why. Here are the foods you should not eat, and here is why. And by the way, don't take vitamin B3 or NAD right now, because your vitamin B3 is not good if you have high uric acid production. Don't take turmeric if you have high bile acid production. And we tell you, don't take NAD if you have high cellular senescence, even though a lot of people take NAD because they think they're going to make you live longer. But that's not true. Because in fact, if you have high cellular sense or high inflammation, you should not be taking NAD. Now, so we tell you exactly what you should not take, and then we tell you what you do need is 22 milligram of elderberry every day. We need 28 milligram of amylase. You need 79 milligram of lycopene. So we literally tell you what ingredients, what vitamins, minerals, food extracts, digestive enzymes, amino acids, probiotics, prebiotics, in what dosages you need. And we actually, Dr. Lufkin, make it for each individual on demand, and we ship it to them, right? So that is the first part, is we tell you what's happening, and then we tell you what to do about it, and we actually make it for you and give it to them. And you can measure, when you do a retest, you can see, how does your gut health change? How does your immune health change? How is your sulfide production changing? How is your cardiac health changing? How is your cognitive health changing? How is your biological age changing? So it's literally a way to know, don't trust us, watch us, right? So it's not a faith, it's a fact. So you can see the changes for yourself.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Let me rewind a little bit and so the key point you mentioned was using mRNA instead of the DNA. So you're actually looking at the gene expression rather than the unchanging DNA. And so the mRNA, it's almost, we've talked to many of our guests about DNA methylation clocks and regulating gene expression through DNA methylation. So in a sense, the mRNA is another way of looking at the effects of methylation, essentially.
Absolutely correct. So basically, on the epigenetics means on top of genetics, epigenetics, right? So you could have methylation, which actually reduces the gene expression, or you can have histones or acetylation, which increases the gene expression. So by looking at mRNA, you're looking at the impact of all the epigenetics.
Yeah. So that's a beautiful point. I just wanted to underscore that. And also, you mentioned in doing the two biome assays of the oral microbiome and the gut microbiome, as well as the blood work, then you're able to generate a biological age from that. And you mentioned cognitive scores for cognition. What do you use as markers for cognitive health?
Of course. Several things. So obviously we're looking at a lot of neurotransmitters, such as GABA production, such as serotonin production, right? And we're looking at all of the pathways that are actually activated when you have a poor cognition or poor memory, right? So we are really looking at, such as your vitamin D production. So we're looking at all of this stuff that will be downstream impacted in your cognitive functions.
I see. Yeah. And for the oral microbiome, we had a couple of guests mention that to avoid all mouthwashes because 100%. Of their effect on nitric oxide, this particular guest, but also you would agree with that because of the microbiome also?
Well, more than anything else, think about that. Mouthwash is no different than taking antibiotics. It kills the good and the bad, everything, right? So it's literally you're throwing a nuclear bomb in your body when you take antibiotics. Same thing when you do a mouthwash, you're literally killing everything. And remember, these organisms are there for many reasons. They pre-digest your food. I don't know about you, Dr. Lufkin. My mom will always say, eat slowly and chew your food. Why is that? Because she was a scientist and she knew that your oral microbes are mixing with the food in the saliva, and they're pre-digesting the food. So they are literally processing the food for easy digestion. So it wasn't that she was worried they would get choked up, that you will choke with the food. It was simply about allowing the oral microbiome to pre-digest your food. And now we know your oral health is directly connected to Alzheimer. Your oral health is directly connected to heart disease. Oral health is connected to diabetes. In fact, we can predict the glucose response for every food based on your oral microbial activity. And we, in fact, have built the model, the AI model, that say if you eat carrot and with these oral microbial activity, what is going to be a glucose response in your blood for this food, right? So imagine if you're able to now, oral health is not about the health of your mouth. Oral health is actually a systemic health. Because if you have a gum inflammation, imagine what happens. Just like a leaky gut, now you have leaky gum. And all the oral microbes are now getting into the blood because you have bleeding gums. And what happens once these microbes go into the blood? The immune system starts to cause inflammation to kill these bacteria and viruses. So now you have a constant inflammation in your body that is coming from these oral microbiome. P. gingivitis, everyone thinks is bad. It is only bad when it starts to produce ginger pain. So when it produces ginger pain, in fact, most Alzheimer patients, they have a very high amount of ginger pain production in their brain. And this is now the theory is, this is what happens to people when they get old. They start to have poor oral health. And, people talk about bad breath as if it's vanity. Well, bad breath is a signature that your oral microbiome is no longer in balance. Right. So it is just not a vanity, it is a signature. It is a symptom of the health degradation.
Mm-hmm. So your program is very comprehensive. In other words, you sample 2 microbiomes and blood tests, and then based on that, you personalize it to the person and give them recommendations and even a supplement that will meet those
That's
needs.
A supplement.
Is that correct?
And same thing. And now for the oral health, we are now launching a personalized toothpaste, the personalized oral lozenges. Personalized oral lozenges you put in your mouth, it's like gut biotics, but only for your mouth. And they're able to adjust your oral microbiome, which contains prebiotics, postbiotics, and probiotics, along with polyphenols, right? So to be able to adjust the oral microbiome. And the idea is the same thing. Why does everyone eat the same food or use the same toothpaste? Because most toothpaste are designed actually as abrasive. They literally are like a silica trying to brush against the teeth. Imagine if you can use a right mixture that will remove the plaque on contact, right? And that's the kind of thing. So we're literally using a gel that can remove chemically the plaque on contact, and then putting in the additional probiotics, prebiotics, and postbiotics and polyphenols to be able to adjust your oral microbiome, right? Same thing, our plan is to do the same thing for skin. You do the skin microbiome testing and do a personalized skin cream for each individual. What if you can do a scalp microbiome and adjust the hair care products? So personalized shampoo, personalized hair conditioner. So our goal is to really, each individual, what can we do to personalize their care for them rather than one generic stuff that is good for everyone, which is really the myth, because you and I don't look the same. I know we're not the same. How can we be saying the same product should work for every one of us?
Yeah, absolutely. What sort of results have you seen from that? Can you give us a couple examples of patients or users that have...
Oh my God, we have published the papers on them. So very interestingly, we published the papers that we showed the people who took our supplements for 6 months, their clinical score for IBS measured by IBS SSS came down by 40% in 6 months. Their PHQ-9 depression score came down by 36%. Their GAD-7 anxiety score came down by 32%. Their HbA1c for their diabetes came down by 30%, right? And then we did the further studies to show just in depression, we measured the people who took our supplement against the same match group, same sex, same age, same conditions, all the same confounding factor who did not take supplement. And we showed 47% reduction in clinical score for depression just in 6 months.
Wow. Well, what's your link between the intervention and the anxiety and depression? Could you speak about that a little bit? Yeah.
Of course. I mean, it's very interesting is that we somehow think that depression and anxiety is a brain disease. Well, it turns out that our gut and brain are connected through the vagus nerve. And what happens in the gut doesn't stay in the gut. In fact, if you were to just Google depression and microbiome or anxiety and microbiome, in fact, it's clearly shown that your gut microbiome and your nutrition has a tremendous impact on people who have depression, anxiety, ADHD, or even addiction. So much so, they did a research study where they took the people, 18 people that have alcohol addiction, and all they did was change their microbiome through a fecal transplant, and the addiction to alcohol went away. Imagine now, cancer and microbiome. They showed that every single tumor has a specific microbiome inside the tumor. And moreover, the cancer therapy, whether they work or do not work, depends on your gut microbiome. So they took the people, they did the immunotherapy, and the people where the immunotherapy did not work, they actually changed their microbiome through fecal transplant. And guess what? The same immunotherapy started working. So imagine that your gut and the reason is, at the end of the day, what does the immunotherapy do? It makes your immune system to do its job. What does the gut microbiome do? It tunes your immune system. So when you change your microbiome, your immune system is now ready to do its job that immunotherapy is asking it to do.
Oh, that's fascinating. So I assume the supplements are daily supplements that people take, and then how often would people need? Oh, okay.
So this is literally the box that comes in. Precision, just what you need and nothing that you don't. And every day you get one packet. It has 8 capsules that are that designed for each and manufactured on the day you do this test, right? This is a stick pack for probiotics and prebiotics. And that's what you get. You get one of this and one of this every day. So every single day when I wake up in the morning, this is what I do. My supplements and my probiotics and prebiotics. And this is a test, a full body intelligence test. Imagine living in a world where illness is optional, and it's simply, you open it up and there you have it. Your stool, blood, and saliva. And literally you send it to us in a prepaid envelope. And 8 days later, you get all the information back in your app, and it tells you exactly what to do. And our fundamental belief is you want to empower users with the information and actionable information so they can act on it. Unlike, I don't know about you, Dr. Lufkin, I did a 23andMe test. It says I'm 6 times more likely to get Alzheimer's. Enjoy.
Right. Yeah.
It just makes no sense to me. And first of all, you ask people, let's assume they believe the APOE4 is the one that actually causes Alzheimer's if you have multiple copies of it. So you ask them, so am I born with that gene? Yes. So that gene just sits there in my body for 60, 70 years. And one day it wakes up and says, holy cow, I forgot something. I need to wipe out his memory now. How can it be? Gene wakes up one day and wipes out your memory. It can't possibly be. Something has to trigger it for it to overexpress or for it to underexpress. And if you can take the trigger away, does it really matter what genes you have? In fact, APOE4 that they talk about Alzheimer's, I don't know if you know Dr. Lufkin and Steven, elephants have 8 copies of their genes. And you know what elephants are known for? Their memory.
Interesting. Well, so we do the supplements daily. How often will they test their microbiomes? Is that a monthly thing or
every 6 months?
Every 6 months. Okay.
Every 6 months, your body changes enough, especially if you're following the recommendation, your body changes enough and we retune it. So the broccoli may be bad for you today, but guess what? In 6 months later, we can say, you know what? It's fine now. You can start eating broccoli because sulfite production has gone down. Or your TMA was too high and you couldn't eat red meat. And now you can eat all the red meat you want because your TMA production is very low.
Yeah. It is. Now, is this covered by health insurance at all? Just thinking about the cost. What is the cost of it? And how affordable is it for people?
So first of all, if you can just do a gut test, it's $149. And all three tests, the gut test, the blood test, and the saliva test all together is $299, right? Our supplements and probiotics, our probiotics are $49 a month. So literally for $2 a day, our supplements are $99. And you can get both together for $149. So imagine for $5 a day, you get your personalized supplements. And I was just at the matcha shop yesterday, and they charged me $9 for a cup of coffee. For heaven's sake, I don't know what's going on in this world. You go to Starbucks and they charge $7 for a latte nowadays. And for $5 here, you get your personalized supplement, your personalized probiotics and prebiotics. So I'm thinking, this is great.
Yeah, no, that it sounds like a great program. And what is Viome's secret compared to other companies that are doing this, or how is Viome differently in their approach?
So first of all, no other company to date is able to ever figure out how to do the RNA testing, right? So that's first part is this technology, we did not develop it. We could not have done it. This came out of a biodefense work at Los Alamos National Lab, where they spent 10 years and God knows untold sum of money to develop this for a biodefense project. And imagine what they were trying to do is to protect our country against a bioweapon. That means they needed to know what these microbes were producing, what RNA they were expressing so they can create antidote for it. And so they developed this technology that we got an exclusive perpetual license to it. And that's one unique thing. The second unique thing is, despite all the massive supplement market, they tried to shove the same thing down your throat. Everyone should take this. And what we realized was, what if you could personalize them? So we had to build a completely robotic, think of a robotic compounding pharmacy. So literally there is a bins that have these ingredients. And when you say this is an order for Dr. Lufkin, it says go to bin 22, get 11 milligram. Go to bin 7 and get 17 milligram. And it creates this powder, which is just for you. It shakes it up, puts them in this pill, capsules, puts them in a sachet and ships it out to you. Right? This is a unique robotic compounding pharmacy that no one has ever built. So we are the only company that does RNA testing to be able to tell you what's happening in your body, tell you what foods you should eat and not eat, and what supplements you need, and then adding more and more things as personalized toothpaste, personalized oral lozenges, personalized product that your body needs.
Yeah, are these supplements simply about replacing what is missing from the assay? Is that kind of the approach there, or?
Yeah, so supplements are not about assays. Supplements are about activating the different pathways, right? So for example, when you look at this stuff and saying, hey, your mitochondrial biogenesis is poor, that means your ATP cycle, remember your high school biology, is not being completed. Now, what are the things that will need for this to happen? That means, do you need CoQ10? Do you really need an NR or NMN here, right? So we literally are looking at to see and saying, if this is happening, how do we change that pathway to be actually either reduce its activity if it is bad, or increase its activity if it is good, right? So can we give you some type of fiber is a prebiotic if you have enough organisms that can produce butyrate, but they're not, so we can give you more the different types of prebiotic for these organisms to be able to activate and produce butyrate.
And are the primary endpoints then obviously the microbiome, the 2 microbiomes, and the blood test? Do you also do clinical endpoints? I guess what I'm getting to is a patient's depressed, or their cognitive scores are messed up, and then they start on a program, they start getting better. If you just tested the microbiome, you might not necessarily.
So we do see them. So what we do, we actually ask you all the clinical questionnaire. So when you sign up, we don't say, do you have depression? We actually have you walk through the PHQ-9 questionnaire. We don't say, do you have IBS? We actually have you walk through all the Rome 4 criteria. So we know exactly your IBS score, your PHQ-9 score, your GAD-7 score. By the way, we look the same thing for Crohn and colitis. We don't say, do you have Crohn colitis? We actually walk you through so we know what is your condition for Crohn or colitis or anything else. So we have all of these clinical questionnaire. Now, from all this data, we are able to also now as a totally separate line of business. Everything we are talking so far is wellness. And then we are able to say, hey, can we diagnose early diseases like cancer? And that's where we built this product called Cancer Detect. Literally, spit in a tube, and we got the FDA breakthrough device designation for this one. 95% specificity, 90% sensitivity. We can detect if you have any sign of stage 1 or stage 0 cancer in your mouth or throat. Right? Now we're doing the same thing for additional cancer, liver cancer, lung cancer, esophageal cancer, stomach cancer, and colorectal cancer. And we're doing the same thing for IBD detect. We can detect if you have a Crohn or colitis, the earliest possible stage, even though you are in remission. Right? So our goal is to be able to keep the wellness business, create our diagnostic business, and then work with the pharma companies to say, hey, this is why people develop colorectal cancer. Can you develop a vaccine or a drug for this? And we literally did that. We licensed 2 biomarkers to GSK. One is for a vaccine for colorectal cancer, and one is a vaccine for an autoimmune disease, based on all the information that we learned. So as a company, think about it. Prevent you from having a disease by keeping you healthy. Diagnose the disease early when they happen, and then find a cure if you come to us too late.
Wow, that's so exciting. I want to be respectful of your time. We're almost near the end. One other question that came up. We just had another guest who spoke about the dangers of gluten, not only in celiac disease patients, but actually in the general population with antibodies to it. And they even went so far as to raise questions about grain and its effect on the microbiome and inflammation. What are your thoughts on that?
What I would call bullshit, right? Complete BS. There are some people who are gluten sensitive and people who have celiac disease. Everyone else is actually good for you. Imagine in India, there are 1.4 billion people, in fact, maybe 1.5 billion now, right? They all eat grain. There is no issue with grain. So this is people come up with these, what I call these theories to sell their shit. Like, don't eat lectin unless you take my supplement. In that case, lectins are all great. My point is, this is a self mechanism. I do not believe the grains that we evolved eating grains. I mean, remember, we all grew up in nature where we ate grains. Grains are not bad for everyone. So there is no universal healthy food. So in a sense, it's not that grains are good or bad. They're good for you or they're bad for you, depending on at what point of time what your body is doing. So I'm not suggesting that grains are good for everyone, but grains are bad if you have a celiac disease, if you have a gluten sensitivity. But most people do not have gluten sensitivity. I would say 95% of people don't have gluten issues, and they can eat gluten all day they want. In fact, some people have very high glycemic response from eating carrot than actually eating wheat. Some people will have very high glycemic response from banana, and some will have it from almonds, even though almonds are considered low glycemic response product. So it's not the product itself, it is how it interacts with your body, with your gut microbiome, and with your host, with blood.
Yeah, it sounds like the recurring theme is all about personalization. Everybody's different, and we need to figure out those tools. One last question: What other than the microbiome, which you're so excited about, what other areas of longevity are exciting you now, aside from this immediate area that you're working on?
Well, again, we don't look at the microbiome as such. Remember, we are looking at the microbiome and its interaction with the human host. Microbiome in itself is not the key. And that's the reason we're looking at the host side of how it is changing the inflammatory markers. Remember, at the end of the day, it's all about reducing the inflammation. When you have high inflammation in your gut and your gut starts to become permeable, guess what? The microbes are going in your blood and it's causing haywire. The people who have food sensitivity is because they have leaky gut and they have IgG to all these food that they are eating. And guess what? They change the food and now they have food sensitivity to the new foods. Because at the end of the day, why do we have the antibodies? Because if you have a leaky gut, every food you eat is going to go into the blood, is going to create antibodies. So point I'm trying to make is you got to fix the root cause, which is fix the leaky gut, fix the leaky gum, reduce the inflammation. And when you reduce the inflammation, many of the symptoms we call diseases are simply the symptoms of inflammation. So we have had people who say, look, my acne went away. We didn't solve acne, we reduced the inflammation that caused acne or eczema. People say my depression and anxiety went away, or I sleep better, or I have less brain fog, or I have more energy. These are simply the symptoms of reducing the underlying inflammation, providing more nutrients your body needs, getting rid of the toxins that your body is producing. And that's it.
Thank you so much. The inflammation we're hearing is playing such a key role in all the diseases you're mentioning, and longevity itself, as we're hearing about in this summit. But thank you so much, Naveen, for being a part of this program today, and also for the great work you're doing, and look forward to seeing you at the next conference as well.
Well, first of all, I wish you nothing but the best for your summit you're doing, and you're bringing an amazing group of people, and I really wish you the best here. And let's make sure that more and more people get to learn about this. At the end of the day, we all are in it together.
Absolutely. Thank you.
This is for general information and educational purposes only, and it's not intended to constitute or substitute for medical advice or counseling, the practice of medicine, or the provision of healthcare, diagnosis, or treatment, or the creation of a physician-patient or clinical relationship. The use of this information is at their own user's risk. If you find this to be on the value, please hit that like button to subscribe to support the work that we do on this channel. And we take your suggestions and advice very seriously, so please let us know what you'd like to see on this channel. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time.